Why do the government and left-wing politicians continue to call concerned citizens far-right when the vast majority are just concerned about illegal immigration?
Right, so we mentioned rhetoric already. Hilary, let me come to you. Obviously, Keir Starmer, the Labour conference today, referred to a policy of reform as a racist policy when it comes to immigration.
No.
I mean, racist, far right. Do you agree with that?
Yes, I do, because if you look at what Reform has proposed on indefinite leave to remain, because controlling migration is absolutely right and proper, it's something the government is committed to, which is why we are making changes to the immigration system. That is one thing, tightening up the rules for settlement and so on. It is completely different to say to people who have lived in this country for a long time, paid taxes, worked, contributed, that their right to remain in Britain, we gave a promise, could be taken away from them and they could be deported. And when people think about it, who do you know who has indefinite leave to remain? It could be the carer who's looking after your ill mother. It could be your neighbour. It could be an in-law. It could be the doctor who treated you at the hospital. And I think it is an immoral policy, and the Prime Minister was right, quite right to call it out, because it is in the end divisive. And as we've just discussed in the wake of the terrible events in Manchester today, there are enough people out there who want to divide the nation, and we should be trying to bring people together and have a sensible debate about the difference between proper controls on migration and not breaking the word that we've given to people about their ability to continue to contribute to this country.
The question was asked about concerned citizens, not about reform, but about concerned citizens, which there is a vast majority that are concerned about illegal immigration, which I don't think you answered.
And do you feel that they are being wrongly referred to as far right?
Wrongly referred to as far right, as well as being ignored.
I accept that there are many people who are concerned about migration. That is why the government is taking a number of steps.
Paul's point is that you feel that they're being called far right, when in fact they're not. That's your view.
Yes. Yes.
Well, I don't accept that the government is doing that. We've called out what Nigel Farage proposed and Reform proposed, but we're also making changes to the immigration system, which I hope people will recognise as they unfold, say changing the arrangements for getting indefinite leave to remain. People have to make a contribution, not be claiming benefits, spotless criminal record, all of those things that we've announced, looking at the way in which the European Convention of Human Rights is interpreted, not leaving it, because if we left the European Convention, we'd be in a club of three in Europe: Russia, Belarus, and the United Kingdom. And there are parties on the panel that are in favour of us leaving.
Alex.
Look, in answer to your question, there isn't, I haven't seen any justification for the use of those terms. And you're right, there are a lot of people who are concerned about levels of immigration. They're perfectly entitled to hold those views and to not be shouted down. And before I was a politician, I was a history teacher. And in my lifetime, I have watched people take words that meant one thing in the 1930s and try to apply them to entirely different situations in the modern age and distort them. Far right used to mean the Nazis who rounded people up and committed the worst atrocities in history and put them in camps and murdered them. It's now used to accuse people who raise concerns about immigration of being the same thing. It's totally unacceptable. What's happened here very clearly is that the Prime Minister went to Labour Party conference and did not want to talk about all of the scandals enveloping his government, didn't want to talk about Angela Rayner, he didn't want to talk about Peter Mandelson, didn't want to talk about Morgan McSweeney, he didn't want to talk about the state of the economy. What he tried to do was distract everybody from that by saying something stupid. And unfortunately, he had a degree of success with that. I don't think we should put up with it. I think we should talk about the main issues and not be calling each other names.
I believe in an inclusive society, but I think when Paul said that people were concerned, they're concerned because they see it as an insidious erosion of our culture and identity. And Mr. Ben, your government don't seem to want to protect that. In the south of Ireland, there's been a 10% rise in population. In the last census in 2023 in the south of Ireland, there was 20% of the people identified as not being born in the country. I think that was a conservative estimate, and I believe it's probably more like 30%.
I mean, obviously, we don't know that statistic. I should just point out.
Yes, but I believe that the UK will soon be going in that direction and will soon reach those figures.
Okay, can I just take issue with the terms like insidious erosion of our culture? That is... This is our human beings that we are talking about. We know in this part of the world what it's like to go away, to get a job, to start a new life away from war, and how we were treated when we moved away. I think what's happened to Keir Starmer is that Nigel Farage is dragging him round by the tail. I think he is hemorrhaging votes on the right and left, and what he's struggling to do is explain to people that the reason you're on a housing waiting list and the reason that the NHS is underfunded and that your child can't get a special school place is not because of immigrants. It is because of successive governments in Westminster, and in this part of the country, that is the reason as well. And now Keir Starmer has decided to go after people like delivery drivers and bring in something like a brickyard. None of that is going to build houses here. None of that is going to bring school places, and none of it is going to fix the NHS. We need to be very careful when politicians start punching down, because it means they don't have any policies that can help you.
I think it's important in these kinds of discussions, because they can tend to get very sort of emotive very quickly, is to sort of look at the facts. And there were figures out this week or last week that showed that in the last 12 months, the population of Northern Ireland has grown by a fraction of a percent. It's been quite small in the grand scheme of things, and the context is different in the Republic and different in GB. But I think here we have to be very wary of what is really happening here and not sort of somewhere else that we see, and try and get caught up in those kind of conversations. The most important thing, I think, is to deal with this as it happens and as it sort of affects us.
Well, let's just get to some statistics then. So 3.4% of the population in Northern Ireland is from an ethnic minority. That compares to England and Wales, where it's over 18%. But in Northern Ireland, just in 2011, it was 1.8. So it has gone up, but it's still very small.
Yeah, I think it's very easy to hide behind some of the statistics. And I actually agree with the original question, because it has been a deliberate attempt by Labour and previously the Conservative government to brand anybody that showed any concern with illegal and uncontrolled immigration as racist. That was wrong. And I'll tell you why. Because people with genuine, heartfelt lived experience, seen as... So I looked, for example, in Belfast, it is the second highest dispersal rate for asylum seekers from hotels into accommodation in local communities, right? HMOs have changed the landscape of some of our communities. It is without doubt that immigration, particularly the cost associated, has had a dramatic impact. And I listen how people can say, well, it's not because of the levels of illegal immigration that's affecting our health service and GP access and housing and school places. But look at the figures. 15.3 billion across the UK by 2029 to provide asylum accommodation and support. That's not including other costs such as legal costs.
Sorry, 15.3 billion what?
Pounds right across the UK for housing asylum seekers and other associated costs. In Northern Ireland alone, that figure will balloon to 400 million. Now, this is the point.
That's assuming the status quo remains.
Yes, and it may well get worse. And it has got worse when we look at the statistics. 50,000 people came by boat into GB in this past year. That's what we know of. But let's look at what that money could actually do. Could that money fund healthcare? Could it help to... The 400 million alone would be the entire capital budget for education in Northern Ireland alone. So I do not accept that anybody that has a legitimate concern in relation to illegal and uncontrolled immigration is racist. That's lazy politics. Just this week, David Lammy tried to insinuate that Nigel Farage was in some way connected to the Hitler Youth. How low can you go? The Labour government are catching on very quick. The silent majority want common sense.
They want border enforcement, and they want to ensure that this country, that those that come to it, respect our laws, contribute, and most importantly, ensure that our culture and our values are not in competition with theirs.
Man here in the glasses.
I completely agree with Jonathan. Just go back to Hillary's point, saying that reform's rhetoric is divisive. The Prime Minister of the country said a few months ago that we risk becoming an island of strangers. Why isn't that divisive? But as soon as it is, Nigel Farage will say it. It's racist. His supporters are far right. He's far right. But when Keir Starmer says it, it's an accident. It's a mistake.
Okay, man here.